This is just a quick disclaimer that this is my very first time making an actual YouTube video, so it might not be the best. That being said though, this definitely isn't my first time making videos. Over the past year, I've done about 500 million views on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts. This is just my first time trying long form content, so we'll see how it goes. With that out of the way, I was driving by a junkyard one day when something caught my eye. It was pretty obvious to me that it was an old T37 tweet, and for reference, here's what a complete T37 looks like. I eventually found the phone number of the guy who owned the junkyard, and I gave him a call and we set up a time for me to come out and look at it. Of course, it's missing lots of pieces and is in rough shape, but you can't be too picky when it comes to Air Force jet trainers. The cockpit was completely gutted, but that's okay, because what I really was after is the jet engine. As soon as I saw that one of the jet engines was still in the jet, I knew I had to have it. For the absolute bargain of $2,500, I was now the proud owner of a T37 tweet, and more importantly, the J69 T9 engine. Unfortunately, when the truck came to pick it up, it was too wide, so I had to get creative. I had the junkyard lifted up with a loader, and then I flipped the wheel struts around so that they would face inboard and not stick out as much. This worked, and it fit on the truck absolutely perfectly. The tweet then made a short journey to my backyard. Now that I had the tweet in my backyard, it was time to actually do something with it, besides sit there and make airplane noises, which I did for a while. I still don't know exactly what I'm gonna do with it, but I knew that I needed to get the jet engine running because what fun is a jet without jet noises? Of course, I didn't want to work on it outside, so the first order of business was to get it into my garage. To do that though, I needed to fix a flat tire. I used the car jack to lift it up, and surprisingly, the nut for the wheel was finger tight. I then used my impact to split the rim. This was a little bit tricky because there wasn't a lot of clearance for my socket, but I eventually got it done. Usually this would be a tubeless tire, but somebody put a tube in it, so it was easy to fix. I pulled out the old tube and ordered a new one, but because I wasn't patient enough to wait, I decided to temporarily patch the old one with a bicycle patch just to get it into the garage. This process is super simple and actually pretty satisfying. First, you just sand around the hole, and then you add some of this glue, and finally you slap the patch on. While it's definitely not a permanent fix, it was enough to get the jet into the garage. I put the tube back in and we were ready to go. I slapped the rim together and then aired up the tube before mounting it onto the jet. You aerospace experts will probably realize that's not the real landing gear, it's just a set of rollers for when it was an A&P trainer. As far as tugs go, the best I could come up with is mounting this tow bar to my bumper using zip ties. I ran out of room in my yard though, so I had to push it most of the way. That was really fun. After a lot of effort, it finally was in my garage and I could finally get to work on it. This was my first time being able to look at the engine without laying in the grass. Luckily, the tweet is super easy to work on and has a bunch of panels like this, making dropping an engine not too hard. Full disclosure, this next part is just a TikTok turned sideways. I found this T37 maintenance manual that has a simple 26-step process to remove the engine, and I also found this engine overhaul manual. Of course, to overhaul the engine, I needed to get it out of the jet, so I started by disconnecting the tachometer. This tells you how fast the engine is turning. I then moved to the fuel control unit to disconnect the throttle cable, and you can kind of think about this like a car's carburetor. It simply controls how much fuel goes to the engine. 30 years of caked on dust led to a snow shower as I worked. I then disconnected the oil return line, followed by the oil supply line. It still had 30-year-old oil in it that smelled nasty, so I collected it for later use. Next, I disconnected the battery leads that go to the starter generator. As the name suggests, this simply starts the engine and then provides electrical power once it's running. Loosening this clamp let me pull the tailpipe off, which gives me clearance to drop the engine. It also let me touch the turbine, which luckily still spins. I disconnected the fuel line, and now it's ready to drop. At this point, the only thing holding it on are these two little bolts and these two rollers at the back. Okay, that's the end of the TikTok. Anyways, I undid the nuts that held the engine in place, and then I was able to slide it back and down. This process would be a lot easier if I had the proper Air Force tooling, but of course I don't, so I had to wing it. The other problem that I ran into was that the jerry-rigged wheel strut was in the way, and of course I couldn't take it off easily because it was holding the weight of the jet. After playing around with it for a while though, the baby was finally delivered. Unfortunately, the compressor blades are really shot, and unless I can find a replacement compressor, it's going to be super sketchy when I run it, even if I blend them out. The first thing I did after getting it out was give it a bath, and it was so satisfying watching 30 years of caked on dust falling off of it. The plan now is to attempt to give the engine a hillbilly overhaul, and there's going to be a lot of things that I'm just going to have to jerry-rig, and some things I won't be able to fix. But all that means is an increased chance of the engine exploding, and I'm a big fan of explosions. I'm going to break this up into a few videos as I work on it, and the next part will be the teardown. Here's a sneak peek of where I'm currently at with the teardown. I'm kind of treating each component like a separate project because they're all pretty complicated. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you want to see me potentially blow myself up and have fun in the process. I promise my YouTube videos will get better as I stop treating them like an afterthought. It's actually kind of fun being able to elaborate a little bit more than usual because I don't have to worry about people scrolling so fast. Oh yeah, because this project's been on Instagram and TikTok for a while, I already know what the comments are going to be, so I figured out how to answer some of the questions up front. First off, a little bit of background about me. I'm actually an aerospace engineer working at Cessna and Beechcraft, and Cessna actually built this airplane a long time ago, so that's kind of neat. I've also been a pilot since 2016, and I already own 2 airplanes, although only one of them flies. All that to say that while I'm definitely not an expert, I at least have a little bit of an idea of what I'm doing. And also, even if I wanted to get this thing in the air, I actually wouldn't have to have my A&P license because it would be considered an experimental exhibition airplane. And you don't need an A&P license to work on experimental airplanes. I only have one goal in life, and that's to fly fighter jets. And yes, this jet's probably never gonna fly, but I'm kind of treating it like practice. As far as what I plan on doing with the airframe, I'm thinking about maybe turning it into a rat rod because that would be really fun. Anyways, hopefully I'll be making some money from YouTube shortly, so I'll be able to do some crazier projects, so stick around.